kind of scholarship. And he went to the civil service overseas to Asia, much the way many, many young men of that time in Britain did. It was a sort of de facto or default career trajectory for him. And he hates the people that he's in charge of because he hates imperialism and he hates the way it makes him have to play this role. He says these people have been spitting on him or kicking him during soccer matches, looking the other way, all these little petty insults and humiliations, and yet he has to somehow maintain this authority, and therefore he has to shoot the elephant. And so he shoots the elephant. What does this say to us about imperialism? What does he say this has to teach us about imperialism? Yeah. Okay. He's making the point that being in charge, being the master, is not a one-way relationship. It does not simply mean that he gets to do whatever he wants. In fact, he is as controlled by the situation as the Burmese are controlled by it. He is, in a sense, sort of painting himself as a kind of victim. What does he say? The tyrant loses his own freedom? Where is the passage I'm looking for? One of you must have it handy. One of those passages you automatically underline when you're reading an essay. No? GSIs, can you help me out? You can't quote it? Okay. So, I guess I'm interested in your thoughts, further thoughts, about using this essay to think through Delany. I'm tempted to even ask you to write something about it, unless we can have a more generally free-flowing discussion here. Do you want to write, or do you want to talk? Talk. Everyone wants to talk. All right, I need some reactions then. I need some thoughts about this. Do you sympathize with Orwell? Where does he get off painting himself as the victim? For crying out loud, he's the... Yes? Okay. Okay, so and this comes up forcefully in Bernstein, right? Every imperial power looks to find a way of justifying itself, of legitimating itself, and it dressed up. The Spanish did it through Catholicism and Christianity, right? A civilizing mission that was about bringing these barbarians into civilized existence, giving them God and progress. I mean, Bernstein traces this over time. It morphs from civilizing mission with a kind of religious inflection to progress, bringing progress to these poor, backward parts of the world, and eventually to development. The concept of development itself carries the traces of these earlier stories. The white man's burden is where it started. By the end of it, it's sort of been stripped of its racial tone or terminology. But Bernstein suggests that it still actually carries some of those traces, and it's certainly evident here. Yeah, you had your hand up. Okay. Okay. Orwell is doing a magnificent job of painting a kind of ethnographic, telling an ethnographic story. It's situated in that moment. It takes place in less than a day in this one village, and giving you a real tense sense of exactly what it felt like to be in his shoes and the dynamics of that moment between that horde of Burmese peasants behind him and him as this representative of the British. And we get that story at that scale, and we can think about those dynamics, and yet they are of obvious relevance to this much, much larger, as Delany would put it, sort of international relations type discussion. Yeah. So the tensions are extremely acute at that scale between what he is supposedly representing and doing and what he actually feels. The racial elements of this, what happens at the very end? Where does he end up? The question of whether it was justified for him to kill the elephant. His colleagues or his peers, his fellow Brits, his fellow officers tell him what? He feels like it was needless, right? The elephant no longer was threatening anyone. There was no reason to shoot it other than this sense of pressure that he would be humiliated and laughed at. He would fail to live up to the role of a police officer and a British powerful person, right? But killing it, he says, is really a drag because it's actually worth a lot of money. And he sort of feels like he should be punished for having done this because it didn't make any sense. And what is it that saves him from being sort of indicted in that way, at least informally, by his peers? Yeah. The elephant has killed a man. And to the extent that the elephant killed a man, squished that man into the dirt. The elephant at that point is sort of executable. You cannot go wrong as the authority killing an elephant who has killed a person. But what? Why does that logic not quite hold? The person is not British. The person is merely a coolie, which is a derogatory racial term. What happens at the end? Afterwards, I was very glad that the coolie had been killed. It put me legally in the right, and it gave me a sufficient pretext for shooting the elephant. He says, that doesn't quite stand up for him because in the eyes of a lot of Brits, the elephant was worth more than the coolie. Right? There's an economic logic that would say, no, the elephant is much, much more valuable than the coolie. And to that extent, killing the elephant still didn't make sense. But he says the older men said I was right, the younger men said it was a damn shame to shoot an elephant for killing a coolie because an elephant was worth more than any damn Korangi coolie. I often wondered whether any of the others grasped that I had done it solely to avoid looking a fool. Any other thoughts? Does this add up to a compelling indictment of imperialism? What does he say about British imperialism and its fall? He says, all these things oppressed me with an intolerable sense of guilt, but I could get nothing into perspective. I was young and ill-educated, and I had to think out my problem in the utter silence that is imposed on every Englishman in the East. I did not even know that the British Empire is dying. Still less did I know that it is a great deal better than the younger empires that are going to supplant it. And in many ways, if you contrast the British in Burma to the military junta today, and those words strike pretty cold, right? I mean, British imperialism, for all of its faults, in some kind of historical perspective, looks at least better than King Leopold, at least better than the Belgians in the Congo in a lot of ways, and arguably better than much of what's come since then, which is perhaps the saddest part of all. So we may be wrapped up here unless you have more thoughts. We're a little early. We've still got 10 minutes. I would encourage you to think hard about reading Orwell between Delany and Bernstein. I think that would be a good way of linking Delany and Bernstein, which is otherwise kind of hard to do. And I think it would be a useful exercise in thinking through these questions of multiple scales and uneven development across those scales. In other words, the relations contained in that one moment of shooting the elephant are embedded within much, much longer-term, larger-scale processes of colonialism, imperialism, development of the third world. And there aren't many examples of writing that manages to sort of work between the scales as effectively as this one does. And I think that's a big part of what makes it powerful. Questions? All right, well, I guess we're done. We'll see you on Thursday.